Hey, I'm Rearbucks, also known as Caleb May. I know this is really unusual. For the longest time ever, I've always wanted to avoid showing my face in public. I'm not comfortable at all. But I want to do a first impressions of Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma. Now, because it's on a handheld device, when I'm saying first impressions, I don't mean I'm doing a playthrough. Sadly, what it means is I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about the first 10 hours I've played on Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma. Now, basically I'm going to go through the tech side. Then the tech will include any graphical glitches, the graphics, animation, that kind of thing. Then I'm gonna go through the gameplay. Then, if you really want to delve into that side, I'm gonna go into narrative a bit. I'm not gonna dive too deep though, because Zero Escape's always been a series where it's always about twists and turns and kind of things going very unusual. So, so I'm not going to delve too deep into that, but what I'm going to do is just go over loose brush things, basically be like, there is this type of thing that occurs, or there is that type of thing that occurs. If you don't want spoilers at all for the narrative, and I definitely wouldn't, what I'll do is I'll try to put timestamps in the post below, so you can just skip to the part that you want to see. Okay, so let's get through the text. Oh, and needless to say, there's going to be some people who will be like, well, obviously you haven't played it, since you're only a lowly reviewer for bigger games. You're only Caleb May, also known as Rearbucks. Name dropping because I don't know if I put it in at the start. Well, just to show it. Ta-da! Don't worry, I know it's in a really bad view, but I just want to show that I got it. Funny thing about that. So the reason why I want to do a first impressions, I'll get through this before I start tech, promise. Reason why I'm doing a first impressions is basically because reviews are starting to go out, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to get my review out the door before the release date. In about, as of recording, 4 days time. The reason behind that is basically because of what is basically regional codes. As you can tell by my accent, English. So I always need a European regional code. However, only ended up through just things occurring. I'm not going to say basically just things occurred. We got North American codes. The 3DS system is region locked. The PSP Vita is region locked only to account. However, I only have one memory card. So, we ended up getting a review code about 2 weeks, I would say, before the release date. But the thing is I've only got one memory card, so there was a lot of umming and ahhing about basically saying, look, I don't know if we'll even get any, I don't think we'll get an EU review code. So, it was a case of either I slam down about 20 quid, 14, 20 quid to get a memory card, or I wipe all the saves, or I just wait until the release date, buy the damn game myself on 3DS, which I prefer it as a handheld device in terms of touchscreen kind of thing, and we'll get to that in a bit. But in the end, it took about. I admit it took a lot. It took about just over a week, and I just ended up one day saying screw it, wiped all my saves, wiped everything on my memory card, turned it into a North American account, and yeah, then redeemed the code, and I've been playing it for the first 10 hours within about a 16 to 18 hours time span. Anyway, so hopefully I've put a timestamp below if you didn't want to hear about the hijinks that come from review codes. Problem, I always find it awkward talking about that because you're never quite sure what is too much information. But anyway, so tech side. Fortunately, it does a lot better than I thought it would. Because previously up to this point, we've basically had no animation at all. Yeah, we'll go through the animation first. We've had absolutely no animation at all up to this point. So, for them to introduce it all of a sudden is kind of a big thing. And, it's one of those things that could have so easily gone wrong. That and the fact that the models are a lot more realistic looking if you look at screenshots. So, I've played it on my Vita, as I said. And graphically is where it trips up a tiny bit. Sometimes things are frayed around the edges, sometimes things are blurry when they probably shouldn't be. It's those kind of errors. I don't know if this is a limitation of the 3DS, which has inferior system specs to the Vita. Not hating on that, by the way. As I said, I prefer the 3DS. And again, we'll get to that in a moment. But there are distancing problems, there are blurring, there is an element of kind of lack of aliasing. Sorry, I know basically it's rough around the edges, a bit choppy at times. But besides that, graphically it's pretty damn good. And animation-wise, there are parts you might be a bit funny about. Basically, in terms of animation, sometimes the camera will switch away if there is a significant scene occurring. When I'm saying significant, I mean in terms of the animation. They don't cut away from horrid things happening. But sometimes if there's something that would require a lot of animation, they will just turn the camera away and you'll just hear the audio of what's happening, which it's obviously a sign of an animation limitation. But considering how horror works in terms of that, partially works about the projection of the mind upon what you think you are seeing. Like, Silent Hill, when you're running around the school, you see the small children running around. You can't quite work out what they really are, so you start projecting onto them, being like, oh, it kind of looks like this, it kind of looks like that, and you're kind of imagining the worst, so you kind of make your own horror. And it's like that with Zero Escape. When they turn it away and you hear the audio of horrible things are happening, horrible things, you kind of get the mental image of what these horrible things occur. However, with that said about them kind of way, in terms of animation, it is brutal at times. My favorite part about it is sometimes they've done a lot of work in terms of how eyes work. So sometimes it'll be normal, sometimes it'll be pinprick, sometimes they'll be shaking as well. So you have this person who looks who looks sometimes psychotic, sometimes looks frightened out of their mind, you know. And in terms of how the graphics also look, in terms of those kinds of scenes, sometimes the bodies are mutilated, and they show that in full view of the said mutilation. And within the 10 hours I've played, I'm not going to mention about spoilers, just there is a lot of that kind of thing. Like, when I'm saying mutilation, I mean it in the vaguest sense. Like, in the same sense where if I did a paper cut, that's technically a mutilation. Technically. But I'm keeping it very vague for obvious reasons. But you see all that, and it's fantastic. The other thing about tech, and this is why I kept shuffling about how I preferred the 3DS over the Vita for this type of game. Sadly, the game is a bit tricky to wrestle with in terms of navigating. Because sadly, because they're using a touch screen, it's kind of tricky to kind of move around the room. And the thing is because how the puzzle rooms work, you're no longer going along a 2D plane. It's not like Virtue's Last Reward. It's definitely not like 999. You are moving from, like, when you're moving around the room, you're on a track, but on a whim, you can decide to look up or look down, and you can keep out of that camera angle as you move around. As I said, it's not like Virtue's Last Reward, where if you want to look down or up, you have to basically put it to the camera and then move up. Yeah, you can do that, move up, no problem. Needless to say, this offers a lot more places for things to hide, which, I'll get to that part in a bit. In terms of menu navigation is not a strong suit of Zero Escape. It's definitely a weakened part of this. Basically, it's I'm trying to think of a game to compare it to. I'm tempted to say it's the Witcher, the original Witcher, in that sense. Because, or Fable 3. Because rather, I mean, I'm specifically talking about the flowchart, which, we'll get to that later. But specifically the flowchart, because they use about 3 types of flowchart going. And in addition, they use what's called the fragment kind of screen, where they basically just give you loads of different screenshots of fragments of the group that you're in. And you just pick which one, rather than trying to navigate a flowchart, which is a very important point in the game, because no, I'll mention it in the narrative. But yeah, you have that kind of thing going on. But it's kind of very frustrating to be moving between about 3 or 4 different flowchart screens to get to where you want to be. And even then, it's not that clear what areas you've covered, what areas you haven't. The closest is you'll want to look at the global flowchart. Look on that, because the fragment is not going to help you. It'll tell you if there's a part that's recently opened up for your cast because of the various choices you've made, but it will not tell you your progress in that kind of area. Just, as I said, it's kind of frustrating moving through those. Gameplay wise, so Puzzles! Puzzles are back. Puzzles are definitely back. And puzzles represent my ongoing wrestling match with being a journalist, because it's really frustrating when you get stuck on a puzzle and you're a journalist and you're playing a review copy before release, because you can't, there's no real good way to find out what's going on. And it hit a point where we actually got 2 review codes, so it hit a point where the editor was just like, you're not doing well at this at all. We're gonna give the second review code out to this other person who's part of Bago. Illinois, I think. Illinois. Sorry, I'm terrible with names. We're going to give this code out to that person because you're having a hard time and we want you to be able to kind of discuss things. But I did end up asking the editor to send an email off because one of the puzzles feels glitched. But, like, puzzles are often really hard to work out if they're glitched, because often you won't know if they're glitched, because it's like, okay, it's still locked off. I'm putting in what I think should be the right answer, but it's still locked off. So you end up in this kind of weird situation where you're just like, is it locked off because I'm getting the wrong answer, or am I locked off because it's glitched? As I said, one of the puzzles I've had to ask the editor to submit it because it looks glitched. I'm sorry, but I used all the logic. I'm using all the hints that the game gives me. They do, there is in-character banter in the puzzle rooms, and they do give suggestions of what you're meant to do. And just one of the times, I'm just banging my head against the wall, and I'm just got nothing. So, the puzzles are a lot harder, I would say. Using the virtues/reward scale, using the puzzles from there, I would say on the scale, it is the earlier puzzles very easily fit the garden kind of thing, garden level of difficulty. I'm trying to think of all the other puzzles room in virtues/reward. Garden definitely springs to mind as a sort of measuring point of where the difficulties are at from the start. And it kind of escalates. They do require some odd finagling. Also, in terms of gameplay wise, fortunately, they use lots of different types of puzzles. They're not using the exact same type of mind games, which is really nice and par for the course for Zero Escape. One puzzle I distinctly remember being frustrating was using basically shape manipulation. The idea of kind of making it so shapes look a particular way. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but so the gameplay is pretty good, and you're unlocking things and whatnot. Now on to narrative. Needless to say, this is going to be the mildest of spoiler warnings. I'm going to be talking in the most general, vaguest ways I can about this. But there are some important parts that I've seen starting to seep up within 10 hours. Okay, so assuming you've all switched off, done whatever you want if you don't want to see this. Okay, so one of the really interesting parts about the narrative in terms of what's happening about Zero Time Dilemma, and to be honest, at first I was not sold on, like, when I saw the characters moving in, I was not sold on all at all, because it felt like a celebration, like it felt like a fan game. I think that's the best way to put it. It felt like a fan game in the sense that they were bringing all the previous cast back and I'm waving on them. And the thing is there were mysteries that needed to be wrapped up from Virtue's Last Reward. Things like who leaked in Radical 6. That is that has been brought up, by the way, in narrative, so it is back. So I was not sold when I saw who the cast is. However, playing it through, how they've balanced out who you're playing who, I think is absolutely fantastic. Because who you're playing is basically, you're playing one of three characters. Pretty much split up into the three separate teams. You are the team captains of said teams. And where I find it interesting is you are playing as the main cast with two others who may be reoccurring. You are playing as Carlos, who are trapped with Junpei and Akane. I finally worked out, like, I used to pronounce her name as Akane, I think it was Akane, but Akane. You are playing as Q, who is trapped in with Mira and Eric, and you are playing as Diana, who is trapped in with Sigma and Phi. And where it's interesting is basically you have each team working as a different reference point in terms of the series. You have Carlos, who is dealing with 999 territory and the fallout that occurred after that. And yeah, if you've played 999, you may remember about how Akane was basically who was Zero in 999, and Junpei was trying to find her. Well, he does, and he is changed. It's very quickly apparent he is different. So, you have Carlos dealing with that. You have Diana dealing with what's happening with Phi and Sigma. Which you may remember that when I'm saying Sigma, I mean 60-plus-year-old Sigma trapped in 20-plus-year-old Sigma because of the mind switch. And you have Phi, who at this point is a giant question mark, because even though we've gone through a previous game with her, she is still elusive. We still don't know anything about her. And then you have Group Q, who you play as Q, little boy. By the way, the names of the teams, I actually had a hard time remembering up to the lead up, but here's some advice. The teams are named after the first letter of the team leader's name, and the team leader is who you're playing as. So Team D is Team Diana, Team C, Team Carlos, Team Q is you play as Q. Like boy, who I'm convinced at this point to be a girl, and Team Q is kind of dabbling in new territory. It's dabbling into new kind of twists and turns, and I really love the fact that they've done that, because one of the biggest fears that I was having about Zero Escape was that it would just be a remembrance game. It would not be stepping into new territory. Fortunately, it does, and very quickly it goes in very interesting direction. In fact, all of them do. 10 hours in, going to go a bit deeper into the surface. I'm still speaking pretty vague, but in fact, I might put a timestamp at the bottom about second tier of spoilers. But before I do, just want to say to anyone who is cutting out right now, the story is absolutely phenomenal. It's amazing. Like, as I said, 10 hours in, it's already punchy as hell. It's already kind of like, Zero Escape was a game that took a while to get rolling. You needed to get the endings to get somewhere. But fortunately, Zero Time Dilemma, they are punchy as hell. Things are always happening. Twists are always happening. There was a major twist that, like, yeah, there was a major twist. Like, I would say 5 hours in. Huge twist. But the thing is just waiting for that to trigger off. Oh, speaking of narrative, as I said, I've put a timestamp on where second tier of spoilers are, but interesting thing, and I think this is a part that really shows off about how Zero Time Dilemma might be better than the other two games in terms of gameplay alone. So you have the flowchart system, and there are locks. Sometimes you'll be locked out the narrative, kind of. Basically, you'll get a bad ending if you do. But the thing is the locks won't be unlocked by you by triggering an event. How it works is the decision things sometimes will require you to enter a name in, or enter something in, a word. If you get the word wrong, well. But the thing is how aware it is to what you're putting in, I think is amazing. Like, I started putting in odd names just to mess with the system, and it picked up on it very fast. Like, I picked by the way, people die quite often in this game, so I don't consider this a spoiler. So say Q kicks the bucket, and you're asked for a name, and you put Q in, it'll say that the dead can't do it. Like, can't do what you're saying happened here. So it's very aware. If you put 0, it'll say, who is 0? Like, 0 is unknown. So it's basically saying, well, you can't accuse someone who you don't know who it is. Which I think is really cool. Like, they've really put the effort on this one. And it led to some kind of very strange hijinks by me in the narrative. As I said, they pick up on it. So some bad endings I got was because I started experimenting and I went with a silly answer. The game was not happy with said silly answer. Another thing is sometimes the decision points, sometimes it will be like, pick between X or Y. A-B game style. However, sometimes the flowchart splits off because they'll give you a timer and they'll say, do you do it? Or do you want to write the name out? And the thing is in the do you do it kind of things, sometimes all you'll need to do is push the screen to trigger the event. Like, one of the decision points was, do we push the button? And you have 30 seconds of the two characters you're in just arguing with you the entire time. And you're kind of working out, do I push the button? And pushing or not pushing the button has a significant effect. But yeah, so oh Christ, I'm nearly like, if I'm not over the half an hour mark, I'm nearly over it. By the way, broken mobile phone case. Sorry, I get fidgety. So yeah, I guess I won't be going into second tier spoilers, but as I said, the game's like, the story is pretty phenomenal so far. Punchy as hell, raining new light on old characters in ways I didn't expect. In terms of, I'd say the only criticism I have in terms of how the characters are portrayed is the voice acting. Q's voice acting is amazing, by the way. It's fantastic. Which is good because Q is the bobblehead kid. The only voice acting I would say is weak is Junpei's. They kind of hinted at this in the trailer. It really comes back in full force throughout the game. He is monotone as hell. He's so monotone. I really wish he had a bit more spirit to him. You know, when he's argumentative, I really could have done with him seeming like he gives a damn. He doesn't. Which kind of, I'm not gonna lie, like, if you've played Virtue's Last Reward, at this point, he doesn't. He doesn't give a damn. But I'll leave the other spoilers for later. But as I said, the writing is phenomenal, punchy as hell, recontextualizes what's going on. Few problems so far, minor things, but I'm going to wait until I see the full final ending before I make a judgment call, because sometimes that kind of thing, sometimes it's a case where things look like a massive plot hole, and then you find out they do get resolved. So, in terms of gameplay wise, it's fantastic. Harder, definitely, and yeah, I'm gonna have fun with that. Trying to get to the ending, and that's probably a huge reason why I don't know if I'll get the review out by day one. In terms of tech, as I said, animation is a lot better than expected. Really able to make the scenes grisly as hell. You remember when Kotaro Uchikoshi, I think how you pronounce his name, said that in terms of the brutality, we're going back to 999, he goes beyond 999. This is body horror well beyond 999, because at worst in 999 you had the, like, snake's exploded body, except not snake. Like, at worst. In Zero Time Dilemma, people die and you see their bodies in full flight. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's kind of just left dangling off screen, the worst, but sometimes you see their bleeding bodies and they're dying and they look horrible and they're just... and with the eyes, it's so much worse. If I had to give a grade right now, this is a tricky one, because this is a title very close to me. So it's like, do I give it the grade that I really want to, or do I give it the grade I think it deserves? Kind of self-explanatory. Now I say it like that. It is hitting about a 9 or a 9.5 on a rating. It hasn't... if there was a game in the last year or two that I would have thought that I would give a perfect 10, this is the game that'll probably do it for me, because it means a lot to me. It's a It's the type of game that it's the only game that I've actually been looking forward to for a long amount of time with a meaningful kind of thing. You know, really pushing on, wanting this to happen. Been looking forward to it for 2 years, about maybe 3 years at this point. Ever since I played Virtuous Last Reward. It's phenomenal. Basically, if you were remotely curious about this game, buy it. Just you won't be disappointed. You should buy it. Also, I just realised about how long this has gone on for, so it's a bit extensive for first impressions, and to be honest, a lot of the parts I'm probably going to get thrown in the full review. Things like the tech and the gameplay, I think, is going to just make the transfer to the final review. The narrative, though, is where the game counts, and so far it is fantastic in every sense of the word. With that, thank you for watching. Guess we didn't get into tier 2 spoilers really. I'll still timestamp the send-off, the narrative, gameplay, tech, in case you want to just leap to the parts that are important to you. I also find it interesting how you can't pre-order Zero Escape yet on Steam. Just wait a while, it'll be there. Soundtrack. Oh, by the way, soundtrack's really good. They bring back some of the classics like Bluebird Lamentations and Morphogenetic Sorrow. Except it's not just a direct port. You know, I do hear some parts that do sound a bit different to the songs. But alright. Sorry, I've been rambling way too long. I really hope you enjoyed this. As I said, I'm going to get the review done, write it up, might do another video just piling straight through, just really proper analysis, or maybe a video just contextualizing my excitement, because there is actually a bit of a story behind that. Might be fun. Okay, hopefully I haven't spoiled things too much for people. This game's going to be fantastic, by the way. So good. And in fact, so far it is. I just need to get past these goddamn puzzles. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll post a link in below when the review goes live. Whenever it's in it up. As I keep saying bye. Okay, so anyway, Ken and May, also known as Redbox. Wait for my review on Bago. See you later. Bye.